actually married to someone else. This is adultery, and this has happened on some occasions. And of course, also if the minister, him or herself, is married and they have a affair with a congregant, or even a non-congregant for that matter, again, we're talking about adultery. They're not just involved in clergy sexual misconduct, they're betraying their marriage vows and so on. So that's the sort of the, shall we say, the run-of-the-mill clergy sexual misconduct. But there are a certain number of what could be described as sexual predators within the Unitarian Universalist associations, clergy, and not all of them are well known to the public. And yes, there have been some cases of what Maitre Marc-Andre Coulombe calls such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape, and I haven't blogged about all of them by any means. There's some cases that I know about that I have not yet blogged about, and I'm sure there are cases that I don't even know about because they've been kept hidden quite successfully by the Unitarian Universalist religious community. And yeah, on that note, in terms of keeping clergy sexual misconduct hidden from the public, one thing that seems to be the modus operandi of the Unitarian Universalist Association and also individual Unitarian Universalist churches is legal bullying. And I'm not saying it's the only modus operandi. There are other things that they do. But legal bullying of complainants and victims, but also whistleblowers and critics is certainly engaged in by both, well, certainly the Unitarian Universalist Association, and from what I understand, also various individual Unitarian Universalist congregations. But there's no question, and also individual Unitarian Universalist ministers. Some Unitarian Universalist ministers who are accused of clergy sexual misconduct sometimes, threaten to sue the accuser, for libel or slander or so on. So they try to silence the accuser with threats of legal action. So yes, individual ministers, the leadership of, congregations. So, congregations, as institutions, threatening legal action against complainants. And then, of course, certainly the Unitarian Universalist Association, as an institution, has engaged in various forms of legal bullying, and also not necessarily just legal bullying, but also simply, trying to cajole victims and complainants into signing confidentiality agreements. So even if they're not, doing so in a threatening manner, the Unitarian Universalist Association, from what I understand, based on what I've been told by people whose expertise in such things makes their testimony very reliable, in my view, is that it was very common, even habitual, for the Unitarian Universalist Association to refuse to handle a clergy misconduct complaint unless the complainant signed a confidentiality agreement first. So in other words, if somebody complained about clergy sexual misconduct committed by a certain Unitarian Universalist minister, the Unitarian Universalist Association, based on what I've been told, and I believe reliably told by people who know about these things, that the Unitarian Universalist Association's position was, well, we're not going to do anything until you sign a confidentiality agreement. So even if they weren't threatening the complainant with legal action, they were nonetheless trying to silence the victim or victims by having them sign confidentiality agreements so that they would not speak publicly about the clergy sexual misconduct that they had experienced or which they were complaining about. So that's the focus of today's protest, you know, the false blasphemous libel accusation that the Unitarian Universalist Association made just over 5 years ago in June of 2012 was certainly a case of quite egregious legal bullying on the part of the Unitarian Universalist Association. There was no question that they were trying to intimidate me into deleting blog posts that told the readily verifiable truth about such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalists. I dropped the ministers there because, in fact, only one of the rapists who I had blogged about was a Unitarian Universalist minister. That was Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, who lured teenage Tibetan refugees away from their homes in India with promises of a better life in America, and then proceeded to essentially exploit them as sex slaves over a period measured in at least one case in years and in other cases in months. But to the best of my knowledge, he was not an actual pedophile. The age of his victims, the youngest that I'm aware of, is 16. So that's not quite pedophilia in my books. That's certainly, you know, very young girls, teenagers in their mid-teens. I'd say children would be a reasonable word to use, but not prepubescent children, which is what my understanding of, you know, pedophilia is. It's basically a pedophile is someone who's sexually attracted to children who, you know, have not even reached puberty, and that wasn't the case in terms of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, but it was the case in terms of Richard Buell of First Parish Norwell in Massachusetts, the former parish of Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein, who is also, you know, implicated in this misuse of blasphemy law. I'm sure she had a role in this misuse of blasphemy law in wanting my blog posts about her pedophile rapist parishioner to disappear. And she wasn't named because the lawyer did not name anyone in the letter, but she certainly had another accusation against me in this letter that she wanted a blog post about her specifically to disappear into thin cyberspace. So I think it's very reasonable to conclude that she certainly was quite involved in the Unitarian Universalist Association's false blasphemous libel accusation, in that it sought to intimidate me into removing blog posts that tell the truth about Richard Buell, who was charged, tried, and convicted of committing such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape against a female family member and also a neighbor's daughter. And these girls were no older than 12 years old at the times that the rapes took place, and by some estimates could have been as young as 6 years old when the rapes took place. So we're definitely talking pedophilia there. We're talking about, you know, sexual abuse of children, and even rape, from what I understand, like actual outright full-on rape, forcible rape of children who were no older than 12 years old at the times that the rapes took place. So the UUA is certainly guilty of engaging in legal bullying that sought to conceal these despicable crimes from the public as much as they thought they could, by having me delete the Emerson Avenger blog post that told the truth about these cases. So let's see where we are on the video here. Yeah, we're coming up to the end of a half-hour segment. We're at 27 minutes. We got about 3 minutes left of video. So I'm glad I was able to relate that completely. Not that I haven't done so before. You know, I this monologue can be repetitive because I do go over the same subjects again and again. But I just want to make sure that I actually, that the camera hadn't shut off while I was in my little monologue there, and thankfully it didn't. So again, yes, Unitarian Universalists, specifically the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston, do and does, in fact, misuse Canada's blasphemy law, or at least attempted to misuse Canada's blasphemy law in legal bullying intended to cover up and deny pedophilia and rape committed by not just Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, and not just Richard Buell of First Parish in Orwell in Massachusetts, but any number of other cases, because the whole thing behind a cease and desist demand letter is that it says cease and desist. It's not just about intimidating a person into removing blog posts. It's not just about intimidating people into erasing what they've already said in writing or orally, but it's also about intimidating them into not saying anything more. That's what cease and desist means. It means shut the fuck up. If you don't mind my being rude there. But that's what they're saying. The UUA said, shut the fuck up about our pedophiles and rapists, Robin, or we're going to have you charged with blasphemous libel. And you could spend up to 2 years in jail. That's what that letter said. And clearly I'm not shutting the fuck up, am I? No, I'm actually speaking quite a bit louder now than I was back in 2012, because it is outrageous, out-fucking-rageous, if you don't mind my saying so, for the Unitarian Universalist Association to try to misuse Canada's blasphemy law in legal bullying intended to hide pedophilia and rape. And on that note, we are wrapping up this segment of video, and I'm very happy to see that all of this was fully recorded. So yes, I'm being a little bit rude, but I think under the circumstances, it's justified. Oh yeah.